It took exactly 12 minutes for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to realize she'd walked into a trap she couldn't escape from. She should have known something was wrong the moment she stepped onto that CNN stage and saw Senator John Kennedy sitting there with that particular smile. Not the friendly Louisiana gentleman smile he used for constituents back home. Not the cordial colleague smile he flashed in Senate hallways. This was different. This was the smile of a prosecutor who'd spent 3 weeks preparing for a case he knew he'd already won. The smile of someone holding a royal flush, while everyone else was still deciding whether to bet on their pair of threes. Kennedy had everything arranged with the precision of a man who understood that details mattered. A legal pad sat in front of him, pages filled with handwritten notes in that distinctive scrawl that looked casual but contained enough ammunition to destroy a political career. To his right, a perfectly organized stack of documents, each one tagged with color-coded tabs: green for financial records, yellow for voting history, red for the really good stuff. And there, dead center on the table where everyone could see it, a white coffee mug with bright red letters that read, "I love capitalism." Not a CNN-provided mug, not something he'd found backstage. He'd brought it from home, packed it in his briefcase that morning specifically for this moment. That's how you knew Kennedy was serious. When he started bringing props, someone was about to have a very bad day. The town hall had been CNN's idea, pitched as a balanced discussion about America's economic future. Economic policy debate, the future of American prosperity, they called it. Jake Tapper would moderate, one representative from each perspective. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez representing the progressive left's vision of democratic socialism, economic justice, and what they called modern monetary theory. Senator John Kennedy representing fiscal conservatism, free market capitalism, and what he called common sense. The network executives thought it would generate some heat, some good television, maybe a few viral moments for social media. They had no idea they were about to witness a public execution disguised as a policy discussion. The audience had been carefully assembled. CNN had made sure of that. Exactly half young progressive activists, the kind who'd taken personal days from their nonprofit jobs to be here, wearing Bernie shirts under their blazers and tax the rich buttons on their bags. The other half older conservative voters, people who'd been paying taxes since before AOC was born, who remembered when a dollar meant something, and who got physically uncomfortable when anyone started talking about free college or free healthcare, because they understood that nothing in this world was ever actually free. The two groups sat on opposite sides of the studio like rival football fans, eyeing each other with mutual suspicion and thinly veiled contempt. Jake Tapper looked nervous as he reviewed his notes during the final commercial break. His researchers had given him a list of safe topics: inflation rates, employment numbers, infrastructure spending, questions designed to generate discussion without detonating any nuclear weapons. But Tapper had been doing this long enough to recognize the signs. Kennedy was too calm, too prepared, too focused. Men like Kennedy didn't bring their own coffee mugs to television debates unless they were planning something. And AOC, despite her confident smile and perfectly styled outfit, had that slight tension around her eyes that came from knowing you were walking into hostile territory, but not quite understanding how hostile it was about to become. Cameras came back on. The red lights glowed. Tapper did his introductions, laying out the ground rules, reminding everyone to be respectful, to let each other finish their points, to focus on policy rather than personality. All the standard television debate protocols that would be completely ignored within the next 15 minutes. He started with what he thought was a softball question, something about inflation. Easy territory. Everyone had opinions on inflation. It was in the news every day. People saw it at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in their rent statements. Safe ground. AOC launched into her prepared response with the confidence of someone who'd given this same speech 1,000 times before. Her voice had that distinctive quality that had made her famous, that blend of righteous indignation and youthful idealism that played so well on social media. She talked about corporate greed, about price gouging, about how billionaires were stealing from working families. She mentioned supply chain issues but quickly pivoted back to her main theme: the wealthy few exploiting the struggling many. Every sentence was crafted for maximum shareability, every phrase designed to generate applause lines. She hit her talking points with the precision of someone who'd tested them on TikTok and Instagram, who knew exactly which words would generate thousands of retweets and dozens of supportive think pieces in progressive publications. The progressive side of the audience loved it. They applauded after nearly every sentence. Someone whistled. A few people actually stood up. This was their champion, their voice. The woman who'd stormed into Congress and refused to play by the old rules, who called out hypocrisy wherever she saw it, who wasn't afraid to challenge the establishment. They'd come here to see her win, and for about 90 seconds it looked like she might. Then Kennedy leaned forward. That smile got a little wider. He adjusted his microphone with the deliberate slowness of a man who was about to deliver a performance. And when he spoke, his voice carried that slow Louisiana drawl that made every single word sound like it was being served alongside sweet tea and pecan pie on a Sunday afternoon. Friendly, conversational, absolutely lethal. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, he began, drawing out her last name with exaggerated care. That's all real interesting, truly. You make some compelling points, very passionate, very sincere. I can see why people find you so engaging. But before we get too deep into this discussion about inflation and corporate greed and all these big policy proposals, I wonder if you could help me with something. See, I'm just a simple country lawyer. Well, senator now, but old habits die hard. And I'm having a little bit of trouble following your explanation. Could you do me a favor and define inflation for me? Just the basic definition. You know, so we're all working with the same understanding here. The question hung in the air. It seemed innocent enough. Define inflation. Economics 101. The kind of thing any freshman student could answer. AOC blinked once, thrown slightly off balance by the simplicity of the question after her elaborate answer. But she recovered quickly, her confidence returning. This was easy. Inflation is when prices go up because of corporate greed. Kennedy's smile never wavered. He let the silence stretch for just a moment. 2 seconds, 3. Long enough for people to start wondering why he hadn't responded yet. Then he spoke again, his voice still friendly but now carrying a slight edge like a teacher who just heard a student give the wrong answer. No, ma'am, that's what you think causes inflation. I'm asking you to define what inflation actually is. The economic definition. You know, the one they teach in economics classes. You have a degree in economics from Boston University, a very fine institution. I'm sure you learned this in your first or second week of class. Could you share that definition with all of us? The trap was set. AOC didn't see it yet. She stumbled through another explanation, something about purchasing power and wages not keeping up with costs, mixing in social justice terminology with economic concepts in a way that sounded profound but didn't actually answer the question. She was trying to pivot back to her prepared talking points, to return to the safe territory of billionaire criticism and corporate malfeasance. But Kennedy wasn't going to let that happen. He pulled out a document from his stack, handling it with the delicacy of someone presenting evidence in court, which, given his background as one of Louisiana's most successful trial attorneys before entering politics, made perfect sense. He knew how to introduce exhibits, he knew how to build a case, and he knew, most importantly, how to destroy a witness on cross-examination. Representative, Kennedy said, holding up the paper so the cameras could catch it, you graduated from Boston University with a degree in economics and international relations. That's quite impressive. I went to Vanderbilt and then Oxford for law school, and I still have trouble with long division sometimes. He paused for the laugh. Got it from both sides of the audience. That was Kennedy's gift. He could make you laugh even as he was setting you up for complete humiliation. So I'm sure with your economics expertise, you can help educate all of us about economic policy. I'm genuinely looking forward to learning something tonight. He held up the document higher, making sure everyone could see it. This here is your college transcript. Well, parts of it. The parts that became public record when you applied for that congressional internship back in college. The Freedom of Information Act is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Just wonderfully transparent. AOC's smile faltered slightly, just a flicker, but Kennedy saw it. Everyone watching closely saw it. He continued, his voice still friendly, still conversational, but now with an undercurrent of something harder. Now I see here you took Introduction to Macroeconomics your freshman year. Good start. Solid foundation. Then Introduction to Microeconomics your sophomore year, building on that knowledge. And then let's see here. He made a show of squinting at the paper, running his finger down the page. One upper-level economics elective your junior year. Comparative economic systems. Interesting choice. And that's it. 3 economics courses total in 4 years of an economics degree. He looked up with exaggerated confusion, his eyebrows raised in that way that made him look like a confused basset hound. That seems a little light for an economics degree, doesn't it? I mean, I'm no expert, but 3 courses in your major seems like you might have been focused on other things. He flipped through more pages, making a show of reading. But I do see you took plenty of other fascinating courses. Gender and sexuality in the modern world, intersectionality and social justice, post-colonial theory and global power structures, the history of Latin American liberation movements. All very interesting subjects, I'm sure. Very enlightening. Very good for understanding the world, but not exactly what most people would call economics. Kennedy pulled out another document, this one clearly official with the Boston University letterhead visible even from a distance. This is Boston University's degree requirements for an economics major, their official curriculum. Students need a minimum of 12 economics courses to graduate with that degree. 12, not 3. Courses like econometrics, advanced microeconomic theory, advanced macroeconomic theory, monetary economics, international trade, public finance, labor economics. The serious stuff. The math-heavy courses where you learn how economies actually function rather than just talking about them in theoretical terms. He looked directly at AOC now, his smile still in place but his eyes sharp. You took 3 economics courses, and your degree is technically in economics and international relations, with heavy emphasis on the IR part. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. International relations is important. Understanding global politics matters. But it's not the same as understanding economics, is it? Then Kennedy went for the throat. He looked at the transcript again, running his finger down to a specific line. That Introduction to Microeconomics course, that's the important one. That's where you learn about supply and demand curves, marginal cost, market equilibrium, price elasticity, the absolute basics of how markets work, the foundation everything else is built on. He looked up. You got a C+, ma'am. The conservative side of the audience started murmuring. The progressive side shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You could feel the energy in the room changing, like air pressure dropping before a storm. Kennedy let it sit for a moment, let people absorb that information, then continued in that same aw shucks voice that somehow made everything more devastating. Now I'm not saying a C+ is terrible. It's passing. It's fine. Heck, I got a C+ in statistics at Vanderbilt and I still graduated with honors. Nobody's perfect. We all have subjects that don't come naturally to us. But here's the thing, Representative. I don't go around proposing to redesign the entire statistical system of the United States based on my C+ understanding of statistics. That would be silly. That would be irresponsible. That would be like me performing surgery. Because I once got a B- in high school biology. AOC tried to recover, her voice rising slightly with a defensive edge. Senator, economics isn't just about formulas and graphs and mathematical models. It's about people. It's about understanding how working families struggle, how the system is rigged against ordinary Americans, how we need fundamental change to create a more just economy. Oh, I agree completely, Kennedy said, nodding vigorously. Economics is absolutely about people. Real people with real lives and real bills to pay. I couldn't agree more. It's about people who lose their jobs when politicians who got C+ in basic economics implement policies they don't understand. It's about families who can't afford groceries because someone thought printing money didn't cause inflation. It's about small businesses that close because someone raised their costs without understanding marginal profit analysis. You're absolutely right. Economics is about people. That's exactly why the people making economic policy should understand economics. He paused, letting that land, then continued. But let's talk about your economics expertise after college. You became an economist after graduating, right? Worked at a think tank maybe, consulting firm, research position at a university. He waited, his expression expectant. AOC said nothing. Her jaw was set. She knew what was coming. "Oh, that's right," Kennedy said, snapping his fingers as if he just remembered. "You became a bartender, which is honest work. I want to be very clear about that. My daddy owned a small business in Louisiana, and he taught me that honest work is honest work. There's no shame in serving people. But representative, tending bar at a Mexican restaurant in Manhattan isn't exactly the same as working at the Federal Reserve, is it? You didn't become an economist. You didn't work in finance. You didn't even become an accountant or a financial analyst. You poured drinks and served nachos, which requires excellent customer service skills and the ability to handle pressure. But those are different skills than understanding monetary policy." Kennedy leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in his lap, his expression a perfect mixture of concern and confusion. "So let me make sure I have this right. You took 3 economics courses in college, one of which you barely passed. You never worked a single day in the economics field. You never applied your degree professionally. And now, at age 29, 5 years after graduating, you're proposing to restructure the entire American economy with a plan that costs $93 trillion. Ma'am, I wouldn't let you restructure my sock drawer based on those credentials, much less the largest economy in human history." The room erupted. Half the audience burst into applause, some people actually standing and clapping. The other half erupted in outraged shouts, accusations of sexism and elitism and Republican attacks on progressive ideas. Tapper was trying to restore order, his voice rising as he asked everyone to please calm down, to remember this was a civil discussion. But the civility was gone. Kennedy had blown it up with facts and that southern drawl, and there was no putting it back together. AOC's face was red now, her jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. She started to respond, her finger raised to make a point, but Kennedy wasn't quite finished. He held up one hand, his voice cutting through the noise with that same friendly tone that somehow demanded attention. "And just so we're absolutely clear here, Representative, because I don't want anyone to misunderstand me, I am not making fun of bartenders. I have tremendous respect for people who work service jobs. My first job was pumping gas at my uncle's station in Zachary, Louisiana. I know what it's like to work with your hands, to serve customers, to earn an honest living. What I'm making fun of is bartenders who think pouring Bud Light and making margaritas qualifies them to redesign capitalism. There's a difference, a very big difference, and that difference is called expertise." He picked up his capitalism coffee mug and took a long, deliberate sip, his eyes never leaving AOC's face. Then he set it down with a soft clink that somehow seemed louder than all the shouting. "And folks, that was just the warm-up. We haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. So buckle up." The cameras caught everything. AOC's expression, Kennedy's satisfied smile, the split audience, Tapper's barely controlled panic. This was already the most watched moment of cable news in months, and they were only 15 minutes into a 2-hour town hall. What nobody in that studio realized yet was that Kennedy had 7 more rounds loaded, each one more devastating than the last, each one more carefully documented, each one designed to systematically dismantle not just AOC's policy positions but her entire public persona. CNN cut to commercial. The staff rushed around trying to restore order. AOC's team huddled around her, their phones already blowing up with messages from Democratic Party officials who were watching this disaster unfold live. Kennedy sat calmly, chatting with an audience member about crawfish season, completely relaxed, like a man who just completed the first pleasant task on a very pleasant to-do list and was looking forward to the rest of his day. When they came back from break, you could see that Tapper had made the decision to try steering toward what he thought might be safer waters. Policy specifics, numbers, things that couldn't get quite so personal. He'd underestimated just how personal Kennedy was about to make everything. "Let's discuss tax policy," Tapper said, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness of someone trying to reset the tone. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez, you've spoken frequently about the need for the wealthy to pay their fair share. Senator Kennedy, you've defended current tax structures. Perhaps we could find some common ground on this issue. Kennedy perked up immediately, his face brightening like a kid who'd just been told it was time for cake. Oh, good, taxes. I love talking about taxes. Nothing makes me happier than a good discussion about the tax code. He turned to AOC with that dangerous smile. Representative, you talk a lot about the rich paying their fair share. And you know what? I actually agree with you on that, completely. Everyone should pay what they owe. Everyone should contribute to the society they benefit from. I think we can find some genuine common ground on that principle. So let's talk specifics. Let's talk about the Met Gala. AOC's eyes widened slightly. She knew exactly where this was going. Everyone who'd been following politics for the past few years knew where this was going, but there was no escape now. Kennedy had the receipts, literally. September 2021, Kennedy said, pulling out photographs printed in glossy color on expensive paper. He held them up for the cameras, showing multiple angles. You attended the Met Gala wearing a lovely white dress with "Tax the Rich" written on it in big red letters. Very striking. Made quite the statement. Got a lot of attention on social media. Millions of impressions, as they say. The dress was designed by Aurora James, a very talented designer. Brother Veli's is her brand. Beautiful work, very expensive work. He arranged the photos on the table in front of him like a detective laying out evidence. AOC in her designer gown, surrounded by celebrities and champagne and luxury at every turn. The optics had been questionable even to her supporters at the time, but it had generated enough viral attention that her team had considered it a win. Kennedy was about to show them why it wasn't. Now, tickets to the Met Gala cost $35,000 each. That's not a typo. $35,000 to attend a party. That's more than many working families make in a year. But you attended. And you claimed at the time that the ticket was gifted to you, that the designer invited you as her guest, that you didn't pay for it. Fine. Wonderful. Very generous of her. But here's where my simple country lawyer brain gets a little confused. Kennedy pulled out Internal Revenue Service documentation, official forms with the IRS letterhead clearly visible. The Internal Revenue Service has these pesky rules about gifts. It's part of the tax code. You know, the thing you want to make stricter for everyone else. When someone receives a gift with substantial value, it has to be reported as income, and it's taxable. The current threshold is $15,000. Anything over that, you're supposed to report it and pay taxes on it. It's not optional. It's not a suggestion. It's federal law. He pulled out his legal pad and started doing math, writing large enough for the cameras to catch every number. Let's add this up together. Ticket price, $35,000. That's already well over the threshold. But wait, there's more. The designer dress custom made for you specifically. Based on similar dresses by Aurora James, we're looking at $60,000 to $80,000 minimum. Could be more. Her designs aren't cheap and custom work costs extra. Professional hair and makeup for the event, probably several $1,000s. Accessories, jewelry, shoes, bag, let's call that another $5,000. We're looking at a total value of roughly $100,000 in gifts and services you received. Kennedy looked up from his calculations, his expression one of exaggerated concern. Now, Representative, I went through your financial disclosure forms for 2021. They're public record. Members of Congress have to file them every year. Very transparent system. And I don't see any reporting of these gifts. Not the ticket, not the dress, not the hair and makeup. Nothing. The tax liability on $100,000 of income at your tax bracket would be roughly $35,000 to $40,000. So my question is very simple. Did you pay taxes on this gift? The silence in the studio was absolute. You could hear the hum of the lights, the breathing of the audience, the distant sound of someone's phone vibrating on the other side of the room. AOC sat frozen, her expression carefully neutral but her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Kennedy let the silence stretch. He was good at that. Silence could be more devastating than any words. Then he continued, his voice still friendly but now carrying an edge of genuine outrage. Let me make sure I understand this situation correctly. You wore a tax-the-rich dress to a $35,000 per plate party where you rubbed elbows with millionaires and billionaires, celebrities and fashion industry elites, people who make more money in a week than most Americans make in a decade. You received approximately $100,000 in free goods and services, and you didn't pay taxes on any of it. Ma'am, that's not political protest. That's not making a statement. That's tax evasion with better fashion sense. AOC found her voice, though it came out more defensive than she probably intended. The dress was borrowed for the event. It was returned afterward. It wasn't a gift in the traditional sense. I didn't keep it. It went back to the designer. The ticket wasn't returned though, was it? Kennedy interrupted smoothly. The makeup wasn't returned. The hairstyling wasn't returned. The experience of attending wasn't returned. The photos that boosted your social media following weren't returned. And even if the dress was technically returned, you still received the benefit of wearing an $80,000 dress for an evening. The IRS doesn't care if you gave it back, Representative. You received value. That's income. That's taxable. That's the law. He pulled out more documentation, this time letters from tax attorneys. I asked some tax experts about this. Real smart folks, partners at major firms who specialize in tax law, people who got better than C+s in their economics classes, and they all said the same thing. If you borrow a $100,000 item for personal use, even temporarily, the IRS considers that a taxable benefit. It's treated the same way as if your employer loans you a luxury car for a weekend or lets you use their vacation home for free. That's taxable compensation. You're supposed to report it. You're supposed to pay tax on it. Kennedy smiled that dangerous smile again, the one that made him look like a friendly grandfather right before he delivered the killing blow. But I suppose when you're making a statement about taxing the rich, when you're calling for stricter enforcement of tax laws, when you're demanding that wealthy people pay every penny they owe, you don't actually have to follow those rules yourself. Rules for thee but not for me, as they say. What's the word I'm looking for here? He paused, pretending to think. Oh, that's right. Hypocritical, that's the word. Is that too strong? No, I think that's exactly right, hypocritical. The conservative side of the audience was loving every second of this. They were applauding, cheering, some people actually filming on their phones despite CNN's rules about recording. The progressive side looked like they'd been physically slapped. This wasn't partisan speculation or political spin. This was documented tax law, official forms, actual numbers. There was no good response. Either she'd paid the taxes and never mentioned it, which seemed unlikely, or she hadn't paid them, which was the exact kind of tax avoidance she'd built her career condemning. AOC tried to pivot, tried to return to broader discussions of wealth inequality and systemic injustice, but Kennedy was already moving forward with the methodical precision of a man executing a well-planned strategy. He wasn't going to let her change the subject. Not yet. Oh, and one more thing, Kennedy said, his voice casual as if he just remembered something minor. You know who learns about tax law regarding gifts and benefits in their second week of class? Economic students. Real ones. The ones who got better than C+s and went on to actually work in the field. It's basic stuff, fundamental concepts, but I'm sure you meant well. I'm sure your intentions were pure. You just didn't know the law you were breaking while demanding everyone else follow stricter laws. Honest mistake. Tapper was desperately trying to regain control of the town hall, his carefully planned questions abandoned in favor of just trying to move on to anything else. Senator Kennedy, perhaps we should discuss job creation and economic development policies. Representative Ocasio-Cortez has been vocal about. Perfect? Kennedy practically bounced in his seat, his energy somehow both genuine and theatrical. Let's talk about job creation. Let's talk about Amazon. Oh, I've been waiting for this one. Representative, you're from New York's 14th Congressional District, Queens and parts of the Bronx. Beautiful area, hardworking people. And you famously helped kill the Amazon HQ2 deal that was coming to Long Island City. I remember because you celebrated it like you just won the Super Bowl. Tweeted about it, did interviews about it, called it a victory for working people. Let's talk about that triumph, shall we? AOC straightened in her chair. This was her territory, or so she thought. This was a decision she'd stood by for years, one she defended constantly, one that her base absolutely loved. She'd killed a corporate giveaway. She'd stood up to Amazon. She'd fought for her community. The talking points practically wrote themselves. That deal was corporate welfare at its worst. We were going to give $3 billion to the richest man in the world, to Jeff Bezos. While teachers couldn't afford rent and families were struggling to pay for health care, it was wrong. It was unjust. And we stopped it. Stop right there. Kennedy held up his hand like a traffic cop. That sentence, that one sentence right there, that's where we need to have a teaching moment. Because that sentence reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how economics works. And I mean fundamental, basic. The kind of thing they teach in week 3 of Intro to Economics. The kind of thing you would have learned if you'd gotten better than a C+. And this misunderstanding cost your constituents 25,000 jobs. Real jobs, good jobs, jobs that would have changed lives. So let's break this down very carefully. He pulled out a complete breakdown of the Amazon deal, printed and highlighted and organized with tabs. This wasn't a quick Google search. This was research, deep research, the kind of preparation that took weeks. Amazon was planning to build their second headquarters in Long Island City, Queens, right in your district. They projected 25,000 to 40,000 jobs over 10 years once fully operational. The average salary for these positions was projected at $150,000 per year. Let me say that again because it's important. $150,000 per year. These weren't minimum wage warehouse jobs. These were tech positions. Engineers, developers, project managers, six-figure salaries. Kennedy looked directly at the camera, addressing the audience at home rather than just the people in the studio. Now, everyone watching needs to understand something crucial, something that Representative Ocasio-Cortez apparently still doesn't understand even after being in Congress for 5 years. Tax incentives are not cash. They're not money sitting in a bank account. They're not funds that can be redirected to other programs. This is absolutely critical to understand. He turned back to AOC, his voice taking on the patient tone of a professor with a struggling student. Representative Ocasio-Cortez genuinely thought, truly believed, that New York was writing Amazon a $3 billion check. She thought there was $3 billion of actual money, real currency, sitting somewhere in a New York State bank account that was going to be given to Jeff Bezos. She thought that if the Amazon deal didn't happen, that $3 billion could be spent on schools or subways or health care or whatever else. She said this publicly, multiple times. It's on video. There's no denying it. He paused, making sure everyone was following. But that's not how tax incentives work. That's not how any of this works. Can you explain to the audience what a tax incentive actually is, Representative? The real definition. AOC stumbled through an explanation about tax breaks and corporate giveaways and loopholes, mixing in language about corporate power and wealth concentration. It sounded good to people who didn't understand economics, but Kennedy was about to explain why every word of it was wrong. A tax incentive, Kennedy said slowly, emphasizing each word, means that Amazon would have paid less in taxes than they otherwise would have paid. Those are the key words right there, than they otherwise would have. If Amazon doesn't come to New York, Amazon pays $0 in New York taxes. Zero. Not a penny. They have no presence there, no employees there, no revenue generated there. New York gets nothing from Amazon. Are you following me so far? He didn't wait for an answer. If Amazon comes to New York with these incentives, Amazon pays some taxes to New York. Not as much as they would have without incentives, but some. Some is more than zero. Basic math. If I offer to give you $5 or $0, which do you take? You take the $5 because 5 is more than 0. That's not complicated. Kennedy pulled out economic analyses from multiple sources. Economists, real ones with PhDs and decades of experience and much better than C+s in their classes, analyzed this deal from every angle. They looked at direct tax revenue from Amazon, indirect tax revenue from Amazon employees, property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, corporate taxes, all of it. Their conclusion: Amazon would have generated approximately $27 billion in tax revenue over 10 years. The incentives would have cost $3 billion. That's a net benefit of $24 billion. $24 billion that could have gone to schools, subways, infrastructure, affordable housing, all the things you claim to care about. Leaned forward, his voice rising slightly. But it gets so much worse, so much worse. Those 25,000 direct jobs paying an average of $150,000 per year. That's $3.75 billion in annual wages just from direct Amazon employment. Money that would have been spent at local businesses, at restaurants, at dry cleaners, at coffee shops, at grocery stores, at gyms and salons and movie theaters. Money circulating through the local economy. Kennedy pulled out more data, more projections. The indirect employment impact, all those businesses that would have grown or opened to serve Amazon employees. Economists estimated another 67,000 jobs. Service jobs, retail jobs, construction jobs during the build-out, real jobs for real people. So we're talking about a total of 92,000 jobs when you include direct and indirect employment. He looked at AOC with something approaching pity now. You killed 92,000 jobs because you thought tax incentives were actual cash. You celebrated saving $3 billion that didn't exist while losing $24 billion that would have existed. You stood up at rallies and gave speeches about how you protected your community, while what you actually did was ensure that your community stayed poorer, stayed more dependent on government assistance, stayed struggling. Kennedy pulled out one final document, this one a map of New York with various locations marked. And you know what the absolute worst part of this whole disaster is? The thing that makes it go from tragic to absurd. Amazon still opened facilities in New York, just not in Queens, not in your district. They opened a fulfillment center on Staten Island. They opened operations in Manhattan. They expanded in the Bronx. So you didn't stop Amazon from coming to New York. You didn't strike a blow against corporate power. You didn't win anything. All you did was make sure your own constituents didn't get the good jobs. Your district got nothing. Zero. While other New York communities got the Amazon jobs and the tax revenue and the economic development. He looked directly at her, his voice heavy with barely contained frustration. 25,000 families in your district could have had access to six-figure jobs. Teachers married to firefighters. 2 nurses raising kids, young people starting their careers, working families who could have finally afforded to buy homes to send their kids to college to build real wealth and security. $150,000 a year isn't rich in New York City. It's middle class. It's comfortable. It's the American dream. And you called them jobs for the rich and killed them because you fundamentally failed to understand how economics works. The room was completely silent now. Even the progressive activists who'd come to support AOC couldn't really defend this one. The Amazon deal had been widely criticized even within Democratic circles as a massive self-inflicted wound. Seeing it laid out so methodically, with such devastating precision, with every number and every consequence documented, made it impossible to spin as anything other than what it was. An economic catastrophe driven by ignorance. Kennedy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more powerful than if he'd been shouting. $150,000 a year. That's a teacher married to a firefighter. That's 2 nurses. That's a young couple finally able to afford a down payment on a house. That's parents being able to pay for their kids' college without drowning in debt. That's working families building something real. And you destroyed those opportunities because you got a C+ in Econ 101. And never bothered to learn anything more. The cameras caught everything. AOC's face, red with anger and embarrassment. Her supporters in the audience, silent and uncomfortable. The conservative side, energized and vindicated. Kennedy taking another deliberate sip from his capitalism coffee mug. This was carnage, but there were still 4 more rounds to go. After another commercial break, CNN was milking this for every advertising dollar they could get. The mood in the studio had fundamentally shifted. What had started as a debate had become something else entirely. A reckoning. An autopsy of failed policies conducted in real time with the policymaker forced to watch. AOC's staff was in full crisis mode during the break, hunched in the corner with their phones. frantically messaging with Democratic Party officials about how to salvage this disaster. Kennedy remained calm, even jovial, chatting with nearby audience members about New Orleans restaurants and the best way to cook a proper gumbo. When they returned, Tapper had apparently decided that if the ship was going down, he might as well steer it directly toward the iceberg. "Let's discuss the Green New Deal," he said, his voice carrying the resignation of a man who knew exactly how this was going to go. Representative Ocasio-Cortez's signature piece of legislation. "Oh, good," Kennedy interrupted before AOC could even begin her response. "I was really hoping we'd get to this one. I read the Green New Deal, all 14 pages of it. Took me about 8 minutes. I've read Chinese food menus that were more detailed and had better economic projections." He pulled out a printout, heavily highlighted and covered in handwritten notes in the margins. "This is quite a document, quite a vision. It promises to make America carbon neutral in 10 years, guarantee jobs for everyone who wants one, provide universal health care, free college, rebuild every single building in America to meet green energy standards, high-speed rail connecting every major city. It's ambitious, very ambitious. The kind of ambitious that makes the Apollo program look like a weekend project." Kennedy flipped through the pages slowly, making a show of reading specific sections. "What I found most interesting about this document is what's not in it. There's no cost estimate, not even a rough one, not even a ballpark figure, just promises. Big, beautiful promises about transforming society and saving the planet, which is nice. Everyone likes promises, but at some point, somebody has to pay for the promises. And there's not one single word in here about how we're going to do that." He pulled out multiple economic studies, fanning them across the table. "So I asked some economists. You'll notice a pattern here. I keep consulting actual economists, people who didn't get C+s, to estimate the cost of everything proposed in the Green New Deal. You know what they found? The American Action Forum said $51 trillion over 10 years. The Heritage Foundation said $93 trillion. Even the liberal-leaning think tanks, the ones that want to believe in this plan, estimated at least $40 trillion. Let's be generous and split the difference. Call it $70 trillion. That's $7 trillion per year for 10 years straight." Kennedy pulled out his legal pad again, doing math in large numbers for the cameras. "The entire federal revenue in 2021 was about $4.4 trillion. That's everything. Income taxes, corporate taxes, payroll taxes, excise taxes, tariffs, everything the federal government collects. Your plan costs more per year than the entire federal government takes in. So my very simple question, the same question every American watching at home is thinking: how do you pay for it?" AOC launched into her prepared response about taxing billionaires, closing corporate loopholes, ending wasteful military spending, using modern monetary theory principles. She talked about economic transformation and investing in the future, and how we couldn't afford not to do this. It sounded good. It always sounded good. That was her gift. But Kennedy was about to show why good sounding wasn't the same as actually working. "Let's do the math together," Kennedy said, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Total wealth, not income, wealth of all American billionaires combined is approximately $4.5 trillion. If we confiscated all of it, every single penny, left every billionaire in America completely destitute, sold all their assets, took everything they own, we could fund your plan for about 7 months. Maybe 8 if we're lucky. Then what? Where does the money come from for the remaining 9 years and 4 months?" He continued without waiting for an answer. "Corporate tax loopholes. You say closing them would generate revenue. Sure. Might get you $100 billion a year if you close every single loophole, which would also crash the economy, but let's say you do it anyway. That's $100 billion. Your plan costs $7 trillion per year. You're still short $6.9 trillion. Military budget is about $700 billion, and you're not actually proposing to eliminate it entirely because we do need some national defense. So even if you cut it in half, that's $350 billion in savings. Still short $6.5 trillion per year. Where's that money coming from?" AOC tried to pivot to modern monetary theory, to the idea that the government could simply print the money needed, That debt didn't matter in the same way for sovereign nations. That transformation required bold thinking beyond traditional economic constraints. Kennedy let her talk, let her lay out the entire argument. Then he methodically destroyed every single point. Modern monetary theory, Kennedy said, shaking his head slowly, is what people who don't understand economics call let's just print money and hope nothing bad happens. It's been tried before. In Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, in Weimar Germany. You want to know what happens when you just print trillions of dollars? Inflation. Massive, economy-destroying inflation. The kind of inflation that turns life savings into toilet paper. The kind of inflation that puts wheelbarrows full of cash on street corners, because that's what it takes to buy bread. I thought we were trying to help working families, not destroy their savings. But Kennedy wasn't done. Not even close. The money isn't even the most ridiculous part of this plan. Let's talk about the logistics, the actual nuts and bolts of what you're proposing. Your plan promises to retrofit or rebuild every building in America to meet green energy standards. Do you know how many buildings there are in America? Take a guess. He didn't wait for her to answer. 136 million buildings. Homes, apartments, offices, schools, hospitals, factories, warehouses. 136 million structures that would need to be either retrofitted with new insulation, new windows, new heating and cooling systems, new everything, or completely rebuilt from the ground up. And you want to do this in 10 years. That's 3,650 days. Kennedy did the math on his pad again, writing large enough for everyone to see. That means retrofitting or rebuilding 37,000 buildings per day, every single day, for 10 years straight, including weekends, including holidays, including Christmas and Thanksgiving and the 4th of July. 37,000 buildings every single day. Ma'am, there aren't enough construction workers in America to do that. There aren't enough materials. The supply chains don't exist. The training programs don't exist. The logistics are literally impossible. He pulled out more data, more projections. You also promised to eliminate air travel and replace it with high-speed rail. The distance from New York to Los Angeles is 2,800 miles. The fastest high-speed rail in the world in China goes about 200 miles per hour. That's a 14-hour train ride. Nobody's taking a 14-hour train when they can fly in 5 hours. You're not eliminating air travel. You're eliminating business travel, tourism, family visits across the country. You're isolating America. Kennedy held up a map of the United States with proposed rail lines drawn in. You'd need to build approximately 30,000 miles of high-speed rail in 10 years. That's 8 miles per day, every single day, for 10 years. China, with an authoritarian government that can seize land without compensation, with unlimited cheap labor, and with no environmental review processes, builds about 1,000 miles of high-speed rail per year. You think America is going to build 30 times faster than China, with union labor, with environmental impact statements, with local zoning boards and NIMBYs fighting every mile of track, with lawsuits and delays and cost overruns. It's not going to happen. It's fantasy. He set down the map and pulled out more technical documentation. Your plan requires solar panels covering an area larger than the state of Texas. Battery storage technology that doesn't exist at anywhere near the scale required. A complete transformation of the transportation system from gas to electric, when we don't have enough lithium and cobalt in the world to make that many batteries. Training 20 million construction workers, when we currently have about 11 million total construction workers in the country. Spending more money per year than the entire federal budget while claiming you're going to make everyone richer. Kennedy looked directly at AOC, his voice sharp now. The friendly Southern gentleman routine dropped for a moment of pure exasperation. This isn't a policy proposal, Representative. This is a children's letter to Santa Claus. You've promised every toy in the store, but you haven't explained how Santa's going to manufacture them, deliver them, pay for them, or fit them in his sleigh. You've written a wish list and called it legislation. And the only reason anyone takes it seriously is because you're good at social media, and people don't want to be called climate deniers for pointing out that your plan violates basic physics. AOC tried to recover, her voice rising with passion. We have to be ambitious about climate change. We have to think big. We can't just accept incremental change when the planet is at stake. Future generations are depending on us to act boldly. There's a difference between ambitious and delusional. Kennedy shot back immediately. Ambitious is Kennedy saying we're going to the moon, and then actually having NASA engineers figure out how to do it with real rockets and real math and real physics. Delusional is promising to eliminate airplanes and rebuild every building in America in 10 years with no plan for how to pay for it, no technology capable of doing it, no workers trained to build it, and no understanding of the logistics involved. You've written a wish list and called it legislation. You've promised transformation but delivered nothing but viral tweets and disappointed voters. The systematic destruction continued. Kennedy was dismantling not just AOC's policies but her entire credibility, piece by piece, fact by fact, document by document. And he was doing it with that smile, that southern charm, that voice that made every devastating point sound like friendly advice from a concerned uncle. The audience was completely transfixed now. This had stopped being a debate and become something else. A masterclass in how to use facts and preparation to destroy an opponent. A demonstration of the difference between social media popularity and actual policy knowledge. During the next break, you could see AOC's team practically in tears. They thought this would be a chance to showcase their candidate on national television, to spread her message, to win converts. Instead, they were watching a public execution carried out with PowerPoint presentations and highlighted documents. Kennedy, meanwhile, was checking his watch. Not because he was bored, because he had more rounds to go and wanted to make sure they had enough time. When they came back, Kennedy transitioned without prompting, as if he'd memorized the entire flow of the evening. Representative, let's talk about something more personal. Let's talk about your grandmother. His tone shifted slightly, becoming more serious. This was delicate territory, and Kennedy knew it. But he also knew the story, knew the facts, and knew that this example perfectly illustrated everything he'd been saying about AOC's tendency to use personal narratives for political gain without regard for truth or consistency. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, you spoke very movingly about the suffering there. You talked about your grandmother living in terrible conditions. Damaged roof, no power, inadequate food and water. You were emotional about it, very compelling. A lot of people were genuinely concerned. You used your platform to bring attention to Puerto Rico's struggles, and that's admirable. Drawing attention to suffering is important. He pulled out printed tweets, screenshots enlarged enough to read. June 2021, years after the hurricane, you tweeted about your grandmother still suffering. You showed photos of her house, damaged and neglected. You blamed the Trump administration for abandoning Puerto Rico. You called it a disgrace that American citizens were living in these conditions. The tweets went viral. Millions of impressions. Everyone was talking about it. It was a powerful moment, or it seemed like one. Kennedy held up news clippings, articles from various outlets. Conservative commentator Matt Walsh saw your tweets. Now you probably don't like Matt Walsh. He's not your political ally. But when he saw that your grandmother was suffering, he decided to do something about it. He organized a GoFundMe campaign. Regular Americans, many of them conservatives who disagree with your politics, donated money. Over $100,000 was raised specifically to help your grandmother, to fix her roof, to restore power, to provide whatever assistance she needed. He looked at AOC, his expression unreadable. Matt Walsh contacted your office to arrange delivery of the funds. He wanted to make sure the money got directly to your grandmother. And you know what happened? You refused the money. Your office said it was a stunt, called it offensive, said you didn't need help from conservatives. $100,000 in donations from regular Americans who just wanted to help an elderly woman suffering, and you said no. Kennedy pulled out more articles, stories from reporters who'd followed up on the situation. Then reporters went to Puerto Rico to check on your grandmother. Independent journalists who wanted to see the conditions for themselves. And you know what they found? The house was fine. Repairs had been done. Your grandmother was living comfortably. She told reporters she was okay, that family members had been helping her, that she appreciated the concern but wasn't in the desperate situation that had been portrayed. He set down the article slowly, letting the information sink in. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. You told America your grandmother was suffering in terrible conditions. You blamed the government. You made it a major political issue. People offered real help, $100,000 of actual, tangible assistance. And you refused it because accepting help from the wrong people politically would have undermined your narrative. Then it turned out the whole situation was exaggerated anyway. Your grandmother was fine. Kennedy's voice hardened, the Southern gentleman routine disappearing entirely. You used your own grandmother as a political prop. You exaggerated or outright lied about her suffering to score political points against your opponents. Then when actual help was offered, you rejected it because accepting would have been politically inconvenient. That's not advocacy, representative. That's exploitation. That's using family members as pawns in your political game. AOC tried to defend herself, started talking about making a broader point about Puerto Rico, about the inadequate federal response, about systemic neglect of the island. But Kennedy cut her off by lying about your grandmother's specific situation, by creating a crisis that didn't exist, by refusing help when it was offered. What exactly was the point, representative? Because from where I'm sitting, the point was to get attention for yourself while making your political opponents look heartless. The point was viral tweets and sympathetic media coverage. The point was never actually helping your grandmother, because if it were, you would have accepted the $100,000. He held up the tweet thread again, making sure the cameras caught every word. You had a choice. Your grandmother allegedly needed help. Americans of all political backgrounds offered help. You could have accepted it gracefully and said that Americans across the political spectrum care about Puerto Rico. You could have used it as a moment of unity. Instead, you rejected the help, insulted the donors, and then it came out that the whole situation was overblown anyway. That tells you everything about her priorities. It's not about helping people. It's about looking good. It's about scoring points. It's about the performance, not the policy. The audience reactions were visceral now. Even some of AOC's supporters looked uncomfortable. Using family members for political gain, exaggerating their suffering, then refusing help. It was hard to defend. The conservative side wasn't even cheering anymore. They were just watching, stunned at how comprehensively Kennedy was dismantling not just AOC's policies but her entire public persona, her brand, her carefully constructed image as a fighter for working people. Kennedy wasn't finished. He never seemed to be finished. Each round flowed naturally into the next, like a prosecutor building a case, each piece of evidence supporting the next, creating an overwhelming picture of incompetence and hypocrisy. Representative, where do you live in Washington, D.C.? Kennedy asked conversationally, as if they were just chatting at a cocktail party. I have an apartment in the Navy Yard neighborhood, AOC answered cautiously, clearly uncertain where this was going but knowing it wouldn't be good. In a luxury apartment complex, Kennedy added. Let's talk about that building. It's got quite the amenities list. Rooftop pool with panoramic city views, state-of-the-art fitness center, yoga studio, resident lounge with catering kitchen, 24-hour concierge service, package room, bike storage, underground parking garage, pet spa. It's very nice, very upscale, the kind of place young professionals dream about living in. He pulled out real estate listings with photos of the building and its amenities. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in your building runs about $3,000 to $4,000 a month. For a two-bedroom, it's $4,000 to $6,000. That's expensive, even for D.C. But you work hard. You're a member of Congress. You deserve nice things. I'm not judging you for living in a nice place. Kennedy's expression shifted slightly. Here's what's interesting, though. Your building is new construction, built in 2018. Luxury development specifically marketed to young professionals and government workers with high salaries. The kind of development that you've actively opposed in your own district. You've called luxury apartments instruments of gentrification. You've said they displace working people and destroy communities. You've said they're immoral, but you live in one. He showed voting records and public statements. In 2019, a similar luxury development was proposed in your district. Beautiful building, waterfront location, amenities similar to where you live. You opposed it vigorously. You organized community meetings against it. You said it would gentrify the neighborhood, raise rents for everyone else, push out working families. The project was blocked. The developer gave up. That land sits empty now. Kennedy looked at her with an expression of exaggerated confusion. So luxury apartments are bad in Queens but good in D.C. Or are they only bad when other people want to build them? When you want to live in one, suddenly they're fine. He pulled out more information about her building. Your building has very strict security, key fob access, cameras everywhere, controlled entry, security guards. There are no affordable housing units in your building. There are no homeless shelters nearby. The building management has actively lobbied against affordable housing developments in the surrounding area. You know why? Because luxury building residents, people like you, don't want affordable housing next door. It might affect property values. It might bring in people who can't afford $3,000 rent. It might change the character of the neighborhood. Kennedy leaned forward. Did you speak out against that lobbying? Did you use your platform to demand your building accept affordable housing nearby? Did you insist on Section 8 vouchers being accepted? Did you do any of the things you demand of developers in your district? Or did you just enjoy your rooftop pool and your yoga studio and your concierge service in peace? The silence was his answer. Kennedy continued. There's more. Your building was constructed by non-union labor. The development company has a documented history of fighting unionization efforts. They've been involved in multiple labor disputes. They pay their workers less than union scale. You've said repeatedly that every construction project should be union only. You've introduced legislation requiring union labor on federal projects. You march in labor rallies. You wear your union-strong merch. But you live in a building constructed by the exact kind of non-union labor you claim to oppose. He spread all the documents across the table in front of him, creating a visual representation of the hypocrisy. You live in luxury while opposing luxury for others. You enjoy amenities while calling similar amenities immoral. You benefit from non-union construction while demanding unions for everyone else. You oppose affordable housing near your building while mandating it in your district. You have security keeping out the kind of people you claim to represent. Representative, that's not socialism. That's not even progressive politics. That's limousine liberalism with better branding. That's do as I say, not as I do, elevated to an art form. AOC tried to defend herself, started talking about personal choices versus public policy, about how where she lived didn't affect her political positions. But Kennedy wasn't having it. Where you live becomes relevant when you make housing policy, he said sharply. You can't live in a luxury building while demanding everyone else accept Section 8 housing next door. You can't enjoy a rooftop pool while calling luxury developments gentrification. You can't benefit from non-union construction while demanding union-only labor. You can't have security keep poor people away from your building while criticizing others for doing the same. That's not policy disagreement. That's hypocrisy. Pure, distilled, concentrated hypocrisy. The cameras caught AOC's expression, a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and the growing realization that there was no good way out of this. Every defense she offered just made it worse. Every attempt to pivot was blocked by another document, another fact, another example of her saying one thing and doing another. Kennedy took a moment, gathered his final documents. This was it, the closing statement, the knockout punch. He'd systematically destroyed her economic credentials, her policy proposals, her personal credibility, and her claims to represent working people. Now he was going to tie it all together and explain what it meant. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, let's talk about small businesses, the backbone of the American economy, the engine of job creation, the place where most Americans actually work. How do you feel about small businesses? AOC, exhausted and defensive, gave a generic answer about supporting entrepreneurship and small business owners. She probably knew what was coming but had no way to stop it. Kennedy smiled that smile. That's interesting, because your voting record tells a very different story, a much darker story. Since you entered Congress in 2019, there have been 17 bills specifically designed to help small businesses, tax relief, regulatory reform, access to capital, pandemic assistance during COVID. 17 separate pieces of legislation aimed at helping the small businesses you claim to support. Want to guess how many you voted for? He waited. The pause was deliberate, calculated. AOC said nothing. 2. You voted for 2 out of 17. That's an 11% support rate for small business legislation. You opposed 15 bills designed to help the very people you claim to represent. 15 times you had a chance to help the bodega owner, the family restaurant, the local bookstore, the neighborhood dry cleaner. 15 times you said no. Kennedy pulled out the specific bills, each one highlighted and annotated. H.R. 1994, the Small Business Relief Act of 2020, provided targeted tax relief for businesses with under 50 employees, not corporations, not Wall Street, small businesses. You voted no. H.R. 7010, the Paycheck Protection Program extension, helped small businesses keep employees during COVID lockdowns. You voted no. H.R. 2877, reducing regulations on small business loans, making it easier for local businesses to get the capital they need to grow. You voted no. He looked up from the documents. Why? Why would someone who claims to represent working people consistently vote against helping small businesses? Small businesses that employ working people, that provide jobs and opportunities in their communities. AOC started to explain about poison pills in the legislation, about corporate giveaways hidden in the bills. Kennedy cut her off immediately. These were targeted bills, specifically for businesses under 50 employees. That's not corporations. That's not Amazon or Walmart. That's the family that owns the pizza place on the corner. That's the immigrant running a grocery store. That's the single mom who started a cleaning business. Real people, small operations. And you voted to deny them help because, why exactly? Because helping businesses somehow offends your ideology. He pulled out devastating data about her district specifically. Let's talk about COVID. During the pandemic, your district lost 3,400 small businesses, permanently closed, gone forever, never coming back. Do you know which businesses survived? The big chains. Target stayed open. Walmart stayed open. Amazon absolutely thrived. But the small businesses, the ones without deep pockets, the ones that couldn't afford to weather months of closure and reduced capacity, they died. 3,400 local businesses gone. And where were you? Kennedy's voice rose with genuine anger now. You supported the strict lockdowns. You supported keeping businesses closed. You opposed the relief bills that would have helped them survive. You championed policies that crushed small businesses while simultaneously making Amazon and Walmart richer and more dominant. And then you had the audacity to blame capitalism for the destruction your policies caused. He pulled out more analysis. You support a $15 federal minimum wage with no exceptions for small businesses, no consideration for regional cost differences, no phase-in period, no accommodations for businesses operating on thin margins. Economists across the political spectrum, including many liberal economists who support higher wages in principle, agree that a $15 federal minimum with no exceptions would eliminate approximately 1.4 million jobs. Mostly at small businesses. Want to know why? Because Walmart can afford $15 an hour. Target can afford it. Amazon already pays more than that. But the local pizza place can't. The independent bookstore can't. The family dry cleaner can't. They'll close or automate or move somewhere else. Kennedy stood up now, his full height making him seem even more imposing. You've never run a business, representative. Not once in your life. You've never hired anyone. You've never made payroll. You've never stayed up at night wondering how to keep the lights on while the government keeps raising your costs. You've never had to tell a loyal employee you can't give them a raise because new regulations just increased your expenses. You've never worried about competition from corporations with unlimited resources and political influence. You've never experienced any of it, but you vote to make it harder for people who do. He pointed directly at her, his voice sharp. You vote to raise their costs. You vote to increase their regulations. You vote to help their big corporate competitors. You vote against every single bill that would make their lives easier. And you do it all while calling yourself a champion of working people. But small business owners are working people. The employees of those small businesses are working people, and your policies are destroying them. Kennedy's voice dropped, becoming quieter but more powerful. Small businesses aren't just statistics, representative. They're not just numbers in an economic report. They're the couple who took out a second mortgage to open a restaurant because they believed in their dream. They're the immigrant family running a grocery store, working 16-hour days to give their children better opportunities. They're the single mom who started a cleaning business so she could set her own hours and be there for her kids. They're the American dream in action. Real people taking real risks to build something, and your policies are killing them. He pulled out final documentation. Your father was a small business owner. He ran an architecture firm in the Bronx. He passed away when you were young, which is tragic. I'm sorry for your loss, but he understood what it meant to take risks, to create jobs, to build something from nothing. He lived the reality of small business ownership. And somehow his daughter grew up to become the single greatest threat to small businesses currently serving in Congress. How does that happen? How do you go from being the child of a small business owner to being the person voting against small business interests every single time? Kennedy gathered all his documents, stacking them neatly. You've never run a business. You've never created a job. You've never built anything except a social media following. But you voted to destroy the people who do those things. You've supported policies that help Amazon and Walmart while crushing their local competitors. You've opposed every single effort to give small businesses a fighting chance against corporate giants. And you've done it all while claiming to represent the working class. He looked at her with an expression of pure disappointment. The working class doesn't work for billionaires, representative. They work for small businesses, and you're putting those businesses out of business. A $15 minimum wage sounds great in a tweet. It sounds compassionate, it sounds progressive. Until the business closes and everyone makes $0 an hour. You know who can afford $15? Amazon, Walmart, Target, the big corporations. You know who can't? The bodega, the family restaurant, the local boutique. You're not helping the working class. You're helping Amazon destroy its competition. And you're doing it in the name of socialism. He held up one final document. This is data from your own district. Since you took office in 2019, small business formation is down 37%. Small business closures are up 62%. The number of people employed by small businesses in your district has dropped by 11,000. 11,000 fewer jobs. But Amazon just opened a fulfillment center nearby. Target expanded. The chains are thriving. You've helped big corporations crush small businesses, concentrated economic power in fewer hands, destroyed local ownership and entrepreneurship. And you call it progress. Kennedy walked toward AOC's position at the table, his documents in hand. You came here tonight to debate economics, but you can't debate something you fundamentally don't understand. You got a C+ in Econ 101 and decided that qualified you to redesign the largest economy in human history. You killed 25,000 jobs in your own district because you don't understand how tax incentives work. You proposed a $93 trillion plan with no way to pay for it and no realistic way to implement it. You drive a Tesla while claiming to be working class. You exploited your grandmother for political points. You live in luxury while opposing it for others. You benefit from non-union labor while demanding unions for everyone else. And you've spent 5 years in Congress systematically voting to destroy small businesses while claiming to help workers. He stood at the moderator's table now, looking directly at the camera rather than at AOC. This wasn't a debate. This was a demonstration. A demonstration of what happens when someone with no expertise, no experience, no understanding of basic economics, and no real-world knowledge of how businesses or markets actually function, gets political power based on social media popularity and viral moments. She's not a representative. She's an influencer who stumbled into Congress with a Twitter following, a brand built on anger and resentment, and a C+ understanding of the policies she's proposing. Kennedy looked back at AOC one final time. Ma'am, respectfully, you are completely out of your depth. You're playing a game you don't understand with other people's lives and livelihoods. Stick to social media. Leave policy to people who have actually studied it, who understand it, who have lived it. Leave economics to the economists. Leave business policy to people who have run businesses. Leave governance to people who understand that good intentions without knowledge create disasters. The room exploded into chaos. Thunderous applause from half the audience. Outraged shouts from the other half, people on their feet. Tapper had completely lost control and wasn't even trying to restore it anymore. This was beyond his ability to moderate. Cameras were flashing. Phones were out despite network rules. Someone had been live streaming to Twitter the entire time. The moment was already viral, already being shared and reshared, already generating millions of views. AOC sat frozen, her face a mixture of shock, humiliation, and barely contained rage. Her carefully constructed image had been systematically demolished over 2 hours using nothing but facts, documents, and her own record. There was no spin that could fix this. No tweet that could undo it. No Instagram story that could change what had just happened. She'd been exposed, publicly and completely, as someone whose expertise was performance, not policy. Someone whose understanding of economics was superficial at best and dangerously wrong at worst. Someone who'd built a brand on representing working people while consistently voting against their interests. Her staff rushed to her side, forming a protective huddle, their faces pale with the recognition that they'd just witnessed a career-defining disaster. Some were already on their phones, no doubt being screamed at by Democratic Party officials who'd watched this catastrophe unfold in real time on national television. Kennedy calmly packed up his documents, organizing them back into neat stacks with the precision of someone who just finished a satisfying day's work. He drained the last of his capitalism coffee, waved to the crowd with that friendly smile, and walked off stage with the confident stride of a man who knew he just delivered a performance that would be studied and referenced for years to come. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Within 2 hours, video clips had generated 40 million views across all social media platforms. Within 24 hours, it had become the most-watched political debate moment since the Trump-Clinton encounters. But this wasn't partisan bickering or personal insults or gotcha moments. This was systematic destruction backed by documentation. This was evidence-based argument at its finest. This was what happened when preparation met opportunity, and someone who actually understood economics faced someone who only performed understanding. C+ in Econ trended #1 worldwide for 48 straight hours. Memes flooded every corner of the internet. Conservative accounts had a field day, creating highlight reels of AOC's worst moments, graphs showing the Amazon job losses, comparisons between her lifestyle and her rhetoric. But more importantly, more devastatingly, mainstream media couldn't ignore it. The evidence was too documented, the arguments too sound, the destruction too complete to dismiss as partisan attack. CNN's own political analysts struggled during the post-debate coverage. Jake Tapper, to his credit, acknowledged what everyone had just witnessed. Representative Ocasio-Cortez appeared unprepared for the level of detail Senator Kennedy brought to this discussion. That was CNN speak for complete annihilation. Even the network's liberal commentators couldn't defend what they'd just seen. The facts were too clear, the record too damning. MSNBC tried to spin it as Republican bullying, as sexism, as attacks on progressive ideas. But when they brought on economists to fact-check Kennedy's claims, those economists, even the liberal ones, had to acknowledge he'd been largely accurate. The Amazon deal numbers checked out. The Green New Deal cost estimates were in line with serious economic analysis. AOC's voting record on small business issues was exactly as Kennedy had described it. There was no serious dispute about the facts, only about whether it had been appropriate to lay them out so brutally in public. Progressive outlets were in crisis mode. The Young Turks spent an entire segment trying to defend AOC, but ended up spending most of their time fact-checking Kennedy's claims and finding them true. Jacobin magazine published a scathing piece criticizing AOC for losing the narrative, for being unprepared, for allowing herself to be outmaneuvered so completely. Even her allies were frustrated. She'd been given a national platform and had been demolished. The polling told the real story. AOC's favorability ratings in her district dropped 12 points in a week. Among voters over 50, among people who understood economics, among anyone who'd actually watched the full debate rather than just seeing clips, her approval rating cratered to 27%. Within 3 days, a primary challenger announced her candidacy. A local businesswoman with an actual economics PhD and a track record of creating jobs. The kind of candidate who would have been easily defeated before. Now she had a real shot. The squad tried to rally around AOC. Rashida Tlaib tweeted support. Ilhan Omar called Kennedy's performance economic terrorism, which didn't make logical sense but sounded dramatic enough for social media. But even progressive Democrats in Congress quietly distanced themselves. Nancy Pelosi, when asked about the debate, said she hadn't watched it but encouraged all members to be well prepared when discussing policy matters. That was Pelosi speak, for she embarrassed us. The real damage came to AOC's legislative agenda. The Green New Deal, already struggling for support, lost its remaining co-sponsors. 3 members withdrew their names within a week. The legislation was effectively dead. Her position on the Financial Services Committee was questioned. Republicans called for her removal, arguing she didn't have the economic knowledge necessary for the role. Democrats didn't defend her. She'd become a liability. This is what happens when performance meets substance. This is what happens when theater meets reality. This is what happens when America remembers what real leadership looks like. God bless our combat veterans. God bless intelligence professionals who serve with integrity. God bless everyone who still believes authentic service matters more than viral moments. The era of celebrity politicians is ending. And it ended because one warrior decided to fight back with facts, with evidence, with absolute moral authority. And America watched her win.